This episode of the Design Your Dream Home podcast is brought to you by CRAN. CRAN is the Custom Residential Architects Network, and by Porcelanosa. Porcelanosa is a luxury lifestyle brand that brings modern European design into your home. You are listening to the Design Your Dream Home podcast with Doug and Steve. Doug and Steve are architects, and they're here to help you design your dream home.
So today we are joined by Cory Smith of Cory Smith Architecture from Naperville, Illinois. This is our first foray into doing a little traveling. We're at a conference called the ALA Conference, Association of Licensed Architects, right? Yes, ALA. And we're at the conference, and I've been able to find a little room here, and we're going to interview Cory Smith. Welcome, Cory.
Thanks, Stephen. Good to be here.
Awesome. So thanks for doing this. This is, again, our first time where we're traveling and meeting people at these conferences. So maybe a little shorter than our typical podcast, but we definitely want to talk to you and learn more about you. So tell us about your firm.
It's a small residential firm. I do some commercial work, primarily residential, though. Single family, things as small as porches, house renovations, house refacing, just people that want to change the look of their home, and all the way up to a brand new home. I've designed and built a $3.5 million house as well. So there's a wide spectrum of things that I do.
So that's interesting, because a lot of people will think that if it's something small like a porch addition or a minor facade renovation, that architects will sort of not take it on because there's not enough of a budget or there's not enough fees there. Why is it that you take on those kinds of projects?
Well, I also build for a living, so it's helpful, and I've found it's helpful when I'm designing and then doing something on a smaller scale, that I can stay involved in it through the construction part. So details that are really important to the project, I can actually integrate into and make sure that they get incorporated, versus the standard architecture or architect-owner relationship where the architect does the design, hands the drawings off, contractor builds it. Some things get cut, some things don't get incorporated, and I like to make sure that they do end up in the final analysis.
So would you call this a design build? Your firm's a design build firm?
Yes, I would.
Okay, that's interesting. So not all architects offer that service, and what does it take to sort of get that credential?
Well, for me, out of college, I got a master's degree in architecture and specializing in residential architecture, and did the standard work for an architecture firm for about 2-3 years, and then never felt that we did things effectively, efficiently, in order to do a set of plans and give it to somebody to build. From that point, I went and worked for a developer who was in the building of where the architect's office was, and we did construction, but we never really did it well. We didn't plan it well. We didn't budget it well. So after about 6 years of that, I went and worked for a general contractor. Got 6-7 years of contracting experience. That's the fun part. The fun part, the fun part's designing it. Yes, it's cool to put something on paper at a small scale and think about the windows and think about the views. But what's really fun is when you implement it and you put it in the ground and you tip a wall up and the windows frame something. That's what's really kind of cool about the building part. You're there for all of the things that you put on paper.
No, it's interesting to say that, because it's amazing that some of these projects take, let's say, a couple of years to get into the ground. And for me, when the project goes in the ground, I actually kind of lose a little interest. Isn't it strange? It's really? Like I'm sort of so exhausted to finally get it to the point where we break ground, and after that sort of groundbreaking, I have less interest, but I guess I just sort of it's less. Whereas for you, this is what gets you really excited. This is probably why it makes sense that you also do the construction. You just really enjoy putting it all together, right?
And for me, it's funny. I lose interest after all of the design, all the detailing is done on the inside. Yeah. When it's that the painter has the house.
Yeah.
At that point, all those decisions have been made.
Okay.
Now it's just a matter of putting, basically the frosting on the cake.
Right.
They're just in there, and so my job is it's not really done. You still have a multitude of different trades that are coming in to finish the minutia of the project. But I like the thing that a lot of people don't like to do remodels because they're very difficult. You're working with existing structure, with existing mechanicals, and you're putting something new into this old space. And there's always a problem. Mm-hmm. Well, I refer to them as opportunities, because there's always something that comes up every day on a job site. And I'm there every day to answer, take care of whatever opportunity comes up.
And then that's funny you say that, because then when it gets to the end and it's now time for furniture and furnishings, I kind of get interested again, because I sort of like that part of it as well. So I guess people have to know that architects have certain strengths and areas of interest. I suppose that lines up. And for me, maybe the front end is exciting, and getting through the permitting and all of that. Sort of by that time, I'm sort of exhausted, and I get rejuvenated when maybe the framing is going up. But you get excited again, and but then there is that long time where you're slogging through the plumbing and mechanical and all of these things that just doesn't look like anything's happening. It just
and I have to tell the homeowners exactly that. You're going to see a lot. It seems like there's a lot that's going on. Yeah. And then it's like your wedding, your marriage, it's the honeymoon, all this stuff is happening, the framing goes on, the roof goes on. Yeah. And then you reach the middle part of, your relationship, and that's when all the electrical and mechanical and plumbing and all the stuff, and, the homeowner comes, it's like, well, what happened today? Right. Well, all the most important, stuff kind of happened today, but you just don't see it. So, and I'm with you. I enjoy, after about a year after the homeowners have been in, and they have put their own personal touches into it, how they interpreted the spaces that you created, what they, how they furnished it, where the artwork is at, what, their personal things that are in there.
The service you offer is not, most architects don't necessarily do this, and I can see it being invaluable for a homeowner. A lot of homeowners might think that actually they prefer the other way, which is, let's say, architect and then a separate contractor. What are, let's say, the pros and cons of the design-build scenario?
I always tell my clients, who better to finish the project and build the project than the person that envisioned the project. And from a design standpoint, you can leave out some of the details in the permitting side, knowing that on the build side you're going to be implementing those anyway. So, from a permitting standpoint, you get the drawings to a point where the municipality is going to give you your permit. But simultaneously, while those are in for permit, I'm talking with all of my subcontractors about budgets, about window specs, about flooring, about tile, about all the finishes that go into it, so that I can hand my clients a meaningful number that it's limited in the number of allowances that are plugged in there. I hear horror stories about some of my competition that just puts in small allowances for very what could be very expensive items, cabinets, tile, things like that. And then they end up with a number at the end of the day that they really can't build off of. They can, but the things that they want are exponentially more expensive than what was put in their budget. Right. And I don't like that. I'm not big on surprises. I like to give my clients a price that I can build that will be happy with the finished product. If they want to change and go higher and put higher quality things in, certainly they're welcome to do that. Right. But I like to give them at least something that they'll be very happy with.
So let's just get into this a little bit. So let's say that the house is, the renovation is $100,000, and maybe these allowances, these are line items where you say that, okay, for tile, we don't really know what you're going to pick, but let's just put $5,000 for now. And later on during the process, the homeowner says, you know what, I found something I really like. It's like $12 a square foot. You say, that's fine. The allowance is $5,000, and this is an extra $7,000. You know that it's going to cost more, but you're happy to do that. Happy, but you want to do that. Yeah. And so the price goes up, but they're controlling it. So that's something that they would like, right? They can control those cost parameters.
And that's the other thing that I like doing. Everybody has a budget.
Yeah.
And I always tell people during the design part, I don't ask what do you want to spend. I ask what are you willing to spend, because there are two different words.
Right.
Everybody wants to spend X, but they're willing to spend Y or Z. And it makes a difference as architects if you're going to design for X or if you can design for Z. Just be honest. My fee is not going on the architecture side is not going to be based on what your budget is.
It's not a percentage of construction, right?
Right.
Yeah. Some people think that homeowners think that if it's a percentage of construction, then the architect wants to spend as much money as possible to create the biggest.
You want to drive it up, and that's really that's not the way myself.
Right.
That's not the way I work.
Right.
I'm all about being as transparent as possible. I also have a DesignBuild development firm called Aspen Creek Partners, and we do luxury homes for people.
Okay.
But what I learned back in the day when I was working for a general contractor, you want to be as transparent as you can. The concrete, when you put together a spreadsheet, I show every number of every line item to my homeowners. This is what concrete's costing. This is what the framing costs. This is what the materials cost, because materials kind of fluctuate in today's economy. But they have a really good understanding of what things cost. So from a tile standpoint, they know that I'm carrying this number, and if they want to spend this number, a bigger number, they can do that.
Right.
That's their call to make. But at least they can see exactly what makes up that bottom line.
And these days I find with more information that cost surety is something that people are looking for. They do their own research. They kind of want to know what everything costs. So you just say, hey, this is what it is, and you can check all you want. I don't really care. This is what it is. Right?
And there's always people that can do things for less money. They can do things, and certainly can do things for more money.
Right.
And that's ultimately though, it's their money to spend, and they can spend it however they would like to. But I'd like to at least give them all the information so they can make an educated decision as to where it would be best to be spent.
Yeah.
This episode of the Design Your Dream Home podcast is brought to you by CRAN. CRAN is the Custom Residential Architects Network. CRAN is the leading resource and voice for architects who focus on collaborative design with homeowners. CRAN provides support, advocacy, and education for custom residential projects, as well as professional development for its members via forums, symposia, publications, and local activities. To learn more about CRAN, visit www.aia.org/CRAN. This episode of the Design Your Dream Home podcast is brought to you by Porcelanosa. With 30 showrooms in the United States and Canada, Porcelanosa is a luxury lifestyle brand that'll make your next project's dream into a reality. From a wide selection of tiles and mosaics to modern bathroom and kitchen cabinetry designs, Porcelanosa makes it easy to bring modern European design elements into your home. Visit porcelanosa-usa.com to learn more.
I find this to be a two-way kind of street, because some homeowners they're a little cagey and they say something like, hey, we want to spend, let's say, $200,000, but I know they actually, I don't know, but they know that they want to spend $400,000, and so I design with the $200,000 in my mind. I'm going to take you at your word. I'll say, okay, so then you can afford 1,000 square feet and 2 bedrooms. Like, oh, we want a 4-bedroom house. I say, well, how much do you want to spend? Let's be honest with each other. We're not trying to trick each other. We're supposed to be a team.
Right. And you find, we as architects are always the bearer of bad news, because everybody always has a level of what they are expecting, and then when you say, okay, so how much you want to spend to get that, and they tell you, and then you have to tell them, well, based on my experience, we're gonna have to find ways to either find more money or reduce the scale of the project. And so we're always the one that has to be, the person that kind of tries to reel them back into reality.
It should happen in the first conversation, right? When we meet. It should really be like, what are you looking to do? And honestly, we should say, I know we want the job, but in our experience, it's going to be in this range. Is that going to work for you, or is that we just have to be.
And I try to, over time, you get better at what you do, right? I mean, you try to go into these meetings not being a marriage counselor, which I've sat in a few, dicey little situations, where they're pitting you against each other. So I always tell them, here's your homework, and I'd like you to do this before we meet. I'd like you to put it on paper. I'd like you to, sit down with a bottle of wine and talk about what this project will entail, what the topmost thing in this project is going to be. We're going to do this project. We have to do X is the most important, and Y is secondary, and Z would be great if the budget allows, but it's not that as important. And be honest, how much are you willing to spend? And so that paperwork, that homework is done before we sit down.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense. So what else? What other areas of focus? I mean, you're a design build architect, which is something unique already. So I think that's an interesting option for homeowners. Tell me more about the kind of work that you do. What sort of excites you these days in practice?
Well, I also try to give some of my time to the high school.
How so?
During the course of projects, when the project gets to a point where it's framed, where the mechanicals are going in or in, and before the drywall goes up, before, that's when all these kids usually see a house. I have been doing this for probably about 8 years with the local high school. And I'll call up the teacher, and she puts together a bus full of students. A couple years ago, they had both the Naperville North and Naperville Central High Schools came through the house. But I'll have them come in, and we'll walk the house. I'll talk about, what goes into the design, what the code requirements are, setbacks, zoning, things like that, just to give them a broad overview of what we do as architects, and then walk them through so they can see how, structure affects layout for plumbing, and it affects the mechanical ductwork, and how, what you need to do and what you need to think about in the design phase so that it gets implemented seamlessly, as seamlessly as it can be. You talk about things like, the current project that I'm on, that I'm doing, we tore off the second floor of the roof above finished portions of the house, and we had a really rainy spring this year. So it was finding the time where the framing contractor was available, the weather was agreeable, and we could take it all apart, put steel in, redo the floor structure properly, build the walls, put the ceiling in, put the roof on, and shingle it before we got water. So we talked about all of that. It's interesting, you see some of the kids where the light is on. They're asking questions. They're clearly, they're kind of at your shoulder. They're always wanting to know what was going on here, what's going to happen here. And then there's the other ones that are, that are there just because it's nice to get out of the school. I always finish my conversation though with them about the aging of the trades. I'm finding, I'm not getting any younger either. My carpenter, he's in his 60s. He doesn't have, there's no young apprentices coming up. And you find that throughout all of the trades. So I tell the kids, if you, in the summers, if you want to do something, spend your summer like I did. My dad was a carpenter. He worked for a general contractor. Go out, work for somebody that puts you in the field, that you can see how things go together. You can see how hard it is, but there's something satisfying about at the end of the day after doing hard work. How it's you have a different appreciation for what gets done.
Right.
And so I try to get these kids, try to spend so much time behind a chair or behind a desk at a chair. But get out in the world and get on the job site and take advantage of that opportunity while you can.
There's definitely a disconnect in, let's say, academia and in practice, where students may be very good at the computer and can imagine all kinds of shapes and forms and fantastic things, and really have no idea how to execute these. And actually, because I'm familiar with a lot of these approaches, where I think that they think that someone else that's more experienced will execute the design. And that's really, to me, a faulty way of thinking. You really have to kind of have a much better understanding. You don't have to be a master builder necessarily, but like when I'm drawing something, I mean, the idea is that this will be realized and built, and it needs to be put together and assembled in a certain way, and has to fulfill all the requirements and everything to be built. And you'd think that more architecture students would, as you say, spend a summer at least, being a small person on a job site, just to really see all the parts and all the pieces. You just think you'd want to know that stuff, just to be like, okay, if I want to do something great, I need to just understand how all this other stuff works. I just need to understand how it all goes together.
I talked to the concrete guys. I did that for a summer. I schlepped those forms down in a hole on a 90-degree day. I appreciate what you guys are doing. It's hard work.
And I've also found at job sites that now as an architect, if I go to a job site and I've got a good feeling about the framer, and I say, listen, he says, hey, can we do it this way? I say, you can do it that way because you know what you're doing here, right? And then again, you might, just because you understand the material, let's say concrete, you might say, if we do the form like this, can we try to do something like this? And then we work it out together on the site. I think they appreciate that somehow you have a feeling for the material, let's say, and the potential, and they are also appreciating that you're giving them a license, respecting their skill, and you can really do some extraordinary things. So we don't have this craftsman-designer relationship the way we've had in the past. I think with houses, there's still a chance for that. Bigger projects, it's not going to happen. If it's not drawn in the plans or written and specified, it's not happening. So I certainly appreciate those opportunities.
Yeah, and they do too. I mean, they appreciate. They don't want to be just told all the time. I respect their opinion.
Right.
And a lot of them have been doing it a long, long time, and they've seen a lot of things, and they'll tell you. They'll tell you when, like the excavator, you've got some bad soil here. I don't have to figure it out. He can tell me. It's just things like that. And it's these, and it all goes down to the tradespeople that you are working with. I have a core group of guys that I won't do work without. They are accustomed to working with the other people of the group. They won't try to take advantage of a situation. They won't screw over one trade to make their job that much easier. And they'll say, hey, you may want to give this person a call so we can talk about this. Figure it out on the front end so that you're not having to figure out what to do on the back end when, a house is already built.
Right. These are the challenges that maybe some people are not aware of on the job site, and probably a lot of architects are not aware of, because let's say I hired a contractor, we work with a contractor, I'm dealing with just the head guy. I don't necessarily see that the plumber and the HVAC guy don't get along, and they create problems for each other. And that happens. It's a real thing where they don't get along and they get in each other's way, and they create issues. We've had times where people would take down parts of their work just because they were, having their own little riffs. And this is this kind of ridiculous behavior, but nevertheless, it's real.
Cut out a big section of the floor joist so
they
get something in. It's like,
that's right.
Well, you're going to tell me about this, or
right? So let's say, in the case you're saying that is that maybe someone will frame something, and then the HVAC contractor will say, "Well, it'd be great if I put a joist. Let me just cut your work and just put my joist there," and you create all these problems. So that's part of your job now. If you're going to do design build, right, you have to kind of oversee all of that.
It's always funny, you go to the job site, the craftsmen, they're using circular saws, and then the mechanical guy comes in to cut his holes, he's got a chainsaw. Wait a minute.
Right. That's awesome. All right. Well, Cory, so thank you so much for spending a few minutes. If people want to reach out to you, contact you, or find out more about you, do you have any websites or links?
I do. It's Cory. It's Cory, CorySmithArchitecture.com.
Okay.
And my cell phone is my phone number, is my office number.
Okay.
I'm as when I tell people when they when they work with me, they get me. It's not like they come into my office and they give them to a junior person. And I'm very passionate about what I do, and I like to make sure it's, I do a lot of work in a neighborhood that I live in. I used to joke about the fact that I would go for a run back when I was younger. I'd run the streets and nobody would ever swerve off the road to hit me because they were mad at something that I did. So if somebody wants to check out my website, it's Cory at Cory Smith. My email is Cory at Cory Smith Architecture.
Awesome.
And my website's www.corysmitharchitecture.com, and my phone number's on there.
Okay, Cory, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay,
it's been
great.
enjoyable.
You've been listening to the Design Your Dream Home podcast with Doug and Steve. If you have any questions or want to give us any feedback on the show, feel free to reach us through our website at thedougandsteveshow.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.